celebration.
Listening to the ideas of these people
on the 23rd
is
took
going to
place
change
in the great Basilica of St. Peter.
the way in which you look at your world.
If you listen carefully to this Vatican
At its
radio
highest
recording,
levels,
you can hear the voice of His
occult
Holiness
is
in
an
prayer.
adventure in mind expansion. Welcome now to the voices of the occult explosion.
I think it's possible for a male personality to occupy himself with this type of activity. And besides being female, which has to be psychic, and I think that anyone who says they practice witchcraft is not highly intuitive, doesn't have extrasensory perception. But you have to be able to project your emotions and influence your environment along the same bridge that you would ordinarily be receiving impressions from.
What is the history of witchcraft?
Well, I think witchcraft has existed ever since the beginning of man. Anytime a mankind attempts to alter his destiny in some way with various methods that may have nothing at all to do with anything obvious, whenever you take an inanimate object and you say, this is going to bring me love, or this is going to bring me courage, or happiness, or wealth.
And now I leap forward in time.
And I think
It is 4 years later when we return to St. Peter's for the concluding act of the first part of the network initiated and inspired by the Buddha. The Second Vatican.
Well, there are organized covens today that I don't really value too much. I think a lot of them are people looking for some kick, wanting to find another way of existing. They may be sincere, but I don't think they have anything to do with religion. Most of them that I've had contact with are not terribly informed about the religious origin of the witchcraft they say they're practicing. And the Druid religion, has gone out of existence quite some time ago.
Where did you get your knowledge of witchcraft?
Well, I come from a group of witches who believe that it's a very personalized action. My grandmother's a witch, and my grandmother's great-grandmother was a witch. I'm 6 generations witches. And I learned from my grandmother when I was a very young child how to do all sorts of little things that she thought were very potent and important. How to make packets, amulets, and cast spells, perform rituals, and use all sorts of methods to read into the future. And she was convinced that the objects were the things that had the magic in them, and I'm convinced that she had the magic in her energy and her emotion and her subconscious, and that's where the thing took place.
Give us an example of a ritual or spell that you use for a specific end and how would this work?
Well, there are all sorts of things that you can do. I'm convinced that if you create your own spell, it has a greater effect on your life. But very many people don't have the confidence to do this as beginners. So I think a simple spell is to light the flame of a candle and to sprinkle a circle of salt around the area that holds the candle and you. And then write down on a piece of paper what it is you want to accomplish in very simple statement, maybe a sentence or two. And then burn this in the flame of the candle, all the while concentrating very dynamically upon the effect of the flame. And when you have burned this to an ash, then you know that what you want is about to come your way. The main purpose in the practice of witchcraft is to generate within yourself a very high level of energy that will then carry you successfully through all situations. So the main point is to psych yourself up and reach some kind of emotional, physical, intellectual high. And this is done through a very, say they are witches, and there are very many thousands of them in the United States, may or may not be witches. That I don't know. I haven't done any research or survey on this. But there are very many and who are convinced that these things work. And scattered throughout the world, I couldn't say all over the millions. Witchcraft only works so long as the witch is capable of sustaining the energy needed. And I think the witch is at times able to falter. You have to be obsessed with what you're doing. You have to become completely involved in it and almost psychopathic about getting the thing you want. And if you're not able to sustain that high pitch of psychosis and obsession, you don't do it. You can't cast the spell. So it works so long as you work at it. And it doesn't work when you become a little bit normal.
I mean, what do you feel that is the value of witchcraft as opposed to just being psychic?
I think psychics are a very passive lot, and a witch utilizes that same ability to sense and know and feel, but she sends out information rather than merely receives it, and she's able to activate conditions and stimulate the environment into certain directions. I am psychic, but I use it in another way. I just receive thoughts. It's too passive a role for me.
I think most people have the ability to become a witch.
No, I don't. I don't think most people can become witches any more than most people can write or dance or sing or paint. I think you're born with the ability. You don't have to be born into a family of witches, but you definitely have to be born with the emotional capacity. In the same way that everyone can possibly project the emotion of love on a movie screen, everyone can't perform witchcraft.
I'm convinced, after 13 years of study and investigation, that the Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial vehicles whose origin, in other words, is off the Earth. So-called flying saucers, in other words, are real. Now, the terms flying saucers and UFOs have been used to mean a great many things. What I mean are the reports of things of indefinite size, shape, and texture. Behavior that's very peculiar, that is unlike things that we know how to do. And reports like this that cannot be identified as known phenomena by competent investigators. This is perhaps 10 to 20% of the total number of reports that have been examined by investigators. Now, the phenomena is worldwide. It's been going on heavily for 25 years, and lightly for 2,500 years, as far as we can tell. Every country in the world, all kinds of people. There are many multiple witness cases. There are a number of cases involving separate witnesses, that is, who don't know people who don't know somebody else is watching the same thing, and who independently report what they observe. There are many cases involving radar, cases involving not only radar on the ground, but radar in the air, and a visual observer on the ground, and a visual observer. There are many cases in which we are dealing with reports of things fewer than 500 feet away from the observer. In some of these cases, the object has been observed on the ground, and observed landing and taking off as well, and in some cases, accompanied by humanoid-looking creatures. There's people with 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, and a body, and people with round creatures. Now, the total picture here, in other words, is an impressive amount of data available from the airport, from the private private organizations, and there are a number of quite respectable ones. There are professionals. There are many scientists who have spent many years of effort digging into UFO sightings and who find that there is an inexplicable relationship, 20%, which point very clearly toward intelligence and control. So I'm convinced, in other words, not because I want to believe that we are being not because I wish we were being but because the evidence is available one of the main things that I bring to these so if to me, coming here from another place is a bonus. Simply with that one young man that there is a higher behavior of UFOs, the sudden changes in the direction of the puppet moves straight up and down, to move silent, out of anxiety, to go forward and move back. Clearly it's not behavior that's achievable with present aircraft. That doesn't mean it violates the laws of physics. It is clear that one studies the data that the government has misled the public. And it is also clear that there have been a number of kinds of measures. I work on the security report for years that will assure people that you're not the one that so I am absolutely convinced that someplace in the government is big corruption in the program. Whether this means that we captured one, duplicated it, or whatever else. I have many reports from people who were in service of strange events occurring where there was a cordon put up around the room or something on which the object, whatever it was, started to work. And this would be equally true if this were a Russian spacecraft or whatever. I've heard many such reports, all kinds of rumors about what we have sitting literally young. I've never been able to establish the behavior. It doesn't prove it. It seems clear to me that the government has that would do it right off this you don't tell the public, you don't tell the Russians. And so, hopefully, after several years of hard work and being tried to go on the first time you got the system, you still don't tell them. Because you don't want to control the country. This is standing out of the first day bombers exploded in the newspapers. One of the many myths about UFOs is there haven't been any good sightings, that all sightings have been wrong. Yet nothing wrong with the top of the one of the cases that was really exciting one that occurred in Gulf Coast, Kansas, a small town over 6 meters. On November 2nd, 1971, Ronnie Johnson was taking care of the ship, 75 miles old, was heading back toward the house to eat dinner when he spotted this glowing object, still vibration from the distance, 35 miles away from beyond one of these sheds on the farm. Suddenly, the glow got much brighter, with a roaring sound of straight up into the trees across the sky. He yelled for a second once he came out and saw this thing moving in the sky. He couldn't believe him that it had been sitting on their soil. So he went back to where the doctor had been and found several rooms on the beach. And also from the glowing room, he had 8 feet diameter in the soil, glowing in warm spots on the sea. When his mother touched the soil, his fingers went to melt. He rubbed the soil off the way to the he couldn't stay close to it. Worked. The soil remained dry for months. It was a poor termination process. Wouldn't absorb moisture. The rest of the place was a 5 mile into the winter. And there was the winter soil. Dry was we're doing tests on that soil. This is but one of hundreds of similar kinds of work. Different kind of things. In the sense that in this case, is the story of Betty and Barney tucked up in the wind, who were taken on board as physically looked back, told they wouldn't remember what happened, and didn't remember anything other than what happened before they were taken on board the saucer. It was only after regressive hypnosis on the part of very competent psychologists 3 years later, they found out what had happened. They each relived the same experience. This bizarre experience of being taken on board by these humanoids against their will, examined, put back out. They were treated as specimens. I spent 4 hours with Betty and Barney.
Joy and profound peace. In this life, as we look forward to your return, we see a with a holy kiss, while at the same time we call down upon you the most abundant blessings of our Lord, of which the apostolic blessing
Very
is
busy years,
the
flaps
and
if you will,
promise.
in France and South America and Australia. Axis pilots, each thinking it was the other's secret weapon that they were watching. But actually, there are documented sightings that go back thousands of years. They weren't called flying saucers, but they certainly match, in the physical descriptions and in the behavior, what we today refer to as flying saucers. Another area about UFOs that really intrigues me is the philosophical one. The implications for mankind of finding out that he is neither alone in the universe nor the most advanced civilization. I think man's ego has really stood in the way of mankind moving in the right direction, that is, a peaceful world for all the people on it. And I think that perhaps the most important thing about UFOs is that it will force the younger generation to think of themselves as being earthlings, rather than Americans or Russians or Chinese, black, white, male, female. If the people of this planet start thinking of themselves as earthlings simply because they recognize that there's somebody coming from someplace else, and so how can you talk about what country you come from if you're dealing with creatures from another solar system? I mean, countries are trivial compared to planets in that case. And I think that's man's biggest hope for his future. It's not that we'll unite against our invaders, so to speak, but rather that we will grow up, that we'll start living up to our potential. Unfortunately, there isn't a government on this planet that would like its people to think of themselves as earthling first rather than as members of that government first. But the philosophical implications of this are really rather profound. And I think that it's very important for us to recognize something that a great German physicist once said. Max Planck said that new ideas come to be accepted not because their opponents come to believe in it, but because their opponents die. And a new generation grows up that's accustomed to it. And so this is why I speak at college campuses. This is why I've given up trying to reach the ancient academics whose minds are made up and they say, don't bother me with the facts, I know they can't be real. And it's because I think that man's biggest hope for the future lies with the youth and with a new look at where man fits in the universe.